Before we get to the video, I have a special announcement to make. Coming out early next year is my new book, The Lightning Blade. It's the first in a fantasy book series inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. It follows the exploits of the heroine Mira Callahan, a rogue who is half elf and half human and the granddaughter of a famous hero. You can follow my Facebook page, SPC Author, for more information, including updates, excerpts, Q&As, and more. I'll also be posting videos on my YouTube channel in the future, as well as using the community tab once the release date gets closer. This has been a passion project in the works for years now, and if you really wish to support me, supporting this book and future releases will be the best way possible. Thank you so much, and now, on to the video. Mental health is a subject with so much potential when it comes to storytelling and character writing, while in reality, these conditions plague and torment so many. When they are applied to fiction, they can not only humanize a character, but also make them very relatable, considering how many of us in the real world already deal with these ailments. While it is true that many people do enjoy the invincible warrior who defeats all evil in their wake, most heroes who stand the test of time have a grounded element to them that helps the audience remember that, no matter what incredible things they achieve, they are still flawed and have limits. And one of those limitations is a form of mental trauma. It is tricky to do, though. Without proper experience, incorrectly writing about a mental condition can come off the wrong way, and even be insulting. It's a double-edged sword. With this in mind, I've certainly made my grievances with Yang's character in the past. In fact, her issues were a focal point of both of my RWBY videos, so to me, it only made sense to start this new series with her. But even before Volume 5, where I think everything started the downward trend, the rest of the volumes would follow, there was a missed opportunity with Yang in Volume 4 that I think ruined her character arc for the remainder of the show, and resulted in her ultimately being one of, if not the most insufferable character. So, let's fix that. First, we need to assess the problem. It's one thing to call something bad without explaining, but that's not what I'm about on this show. So what exactly is the problem with Yang? Well, it's very clear that she suffers from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, due to the events of Volume 3. However, the execution of this disorder is not the best. This comes down to a few smaller problems, which I will go over and discuss how my changes will affect the story. The first is that it goes by way too fast. Trauma takes time to heal. Whether it's mental, physical, emotional, etc., it takes time to recover from any form of injury. Everyone does this at their own pace with their own methods, but Yang's change is too rapid. It happens over the course of a few episodes in one volume. Some could argue that she's still suffering from PTSD past Volume 4, but the effects are brought up so rarely that it barely even matters. The worst part? It starts off really good. I'd even say great. When we first see Yang in Volume 4, she is dejected. She's keeping to herself, she's staying inside, she's quiet, soft-spoken. Her experience has broken her. And watching this character, one who used to be so full of joy and laughter, turned into this sullen, depressed person, is truly gut-wrenching. However, it cuts away too much to RWBY and her gang doing a lot of nothing. And while Weiss and Blake's stories are rather interesting, Yang's is the best. But there's so little time dedicated to it, roughly about an episode or two in total if you include all scenes together, that it feels like the whole arc is rushed just so it can fit into one volume. So my first change is that Yang's story gets more focus. There should be more time of her alone, thinking and reflecting on the events of Volume 3. It might be a bit cliche, but Yang will have times where she's often just staring into space. There is a lot of mental processing she needs to do, and the things you can accomplish with animation could do this perfectly. Even the most subtle movements would tell so much, like avoiding eye contact with others during conversation, as well as actively trying not to look at her missing arm. Speaking of missing, why aren't there more signs of phantom limb syndrome? This is a phenomenon for people with missing limbs where they feel like it's still there. They'll feel pain and perhaps even forget that it's gone and attempt to use it. Have her try to grab a few things or catch herself when an arm just isn't there anymore. Maybe it's played as a joke once, but other times, it's a reminder, not only for the audience, but for her. She's trying not to think about it, but that can only get her so far. The world and her body will remind her. And on top of that, I'd give Yang nightmares. RoosterTeeth is a multimedia company that does 2D and 3D animation. Combine them, give Yang some very stylized and expressive 2D animated nightmares with harsh angles and colors that really demonstrate how she remembers what happened, how her experience has warped her conception of the event. Maybe her idea of Adam and the White Fang are heavily distorted, being more like monsters than faunus. The event plays back in her head in ways that are very traumatized and perhaps not fully accurate. Yes, there is a nightmare scene in Volume 4, but not only is it short, it's also quite underwhelming. It's also a very limited occurrence. Just one nightmare isn't enough. She needs more than that. One time, it could be a distortion of the charge she made against Adam, running through a never-ending hall as he laughs and taunts her. Other times, it shows him trying to hunt down her friends and family as she's completely helpless to stop it. Mix it up. Have them reflect her current mental processes. They get better or worse depending on her condition. This would further build her relationship with Adam, the White Fang, and Blake. Her story is now deeply intertwined with theirs. And yes, I will be focusing on that in future videos. One of the other symptoms of PTSD is insomnia. In later volumes, Yang should get a bit of sleep deprivation while the group is out camping or perhaps just relaxing in shelters. She's both afraid of going to sleep and afraid something might happen. The paranoia is getting to her head, and this loss of sleep provokes some horrifying hallucinations. Adam appears everywhere, ready to take her arm yet again, or he's there to kill her friends, and there's nothing she can do to stop him. She's constantly reminded of what happened, months or even years after the initial event. Talking with her father in Volume 4 can bring elements of these feelings out, and begin to open doors to healing. This will take time and effort though. Not to mention, she's in a safe space, so it'll appear like she's handling it better than she really is. Recovery in a safe environment is great, but you also need to allow the person time to adjust to the outside world again. Truth is, she still has a lot of demons and a lot of issues that aren't sorted. She'll likely freeze up during combat, as similar events or situations will bring a flood of awful memories to her head, not just once, but several times. In grim fights and with Salem's forces, Yang will get panic attacks. With her experience, it will take a lot of time to adjust being in a battle again. It won't be a seamless transition. She would often be a liability, something that the others might call her out for, and I'll get more on that shortly. This brings me to my next problem, her arm. I love the idea of Yang getting a cool robot arm, and the design for it is pretty great, but there is no way she'd realistically accept it that quickly. That arm is a remembrance of her trauma. While in our world, prosthetics have come a long way as medical science grows, that doesn't mean people are always comfortable with them. Losing one of your limbs is a very traumatizing event that makes people feel alienated, and is an actual cause of PTSD in both minors and adults. They're missing a part of themselves, and a prosthetic just isn't the same. A lot of amputees are unhappy with their prosthetics, and some even hate them. So considering Yang's reliance on her arms to punch and strike, I think it makes sense she would have an adverse reaction to the robotic arm. I think the first time she's offered it, it would trigger flashbacks to her meeting with Adam. In a cold sweat, Yang quickly leaves, and every time it's brought up after that, Yang either changes the subject or she ignores it. Her father is worried, and will try to be there for her, but she's not being fully honest. She just says she's not ready for it. She can't look at that arm or even think about it while the awful thoughts coming back. Hiding away in her room, stubbornly trying to fight with just one arm during training sessions, Yang will delay what is inevitable for as long as she can. After spending time with her father, training with him, and gathering her thoughts together, she eventually leaves as she does in the original series, but this time with only one arm. She takes the robotic one just in case, but keeps it closed in its case in her bag. She doesn't want to lay eyes on it, but she can't deny it could be useful. It's going to take a lot of time and thinking before she's going to use it. She would often be a liability in battle once she reconvenes with the rest of the group, to the point where the others are genuinely concerned for Yang to keep going on. Her having trouble in battle is becoming a common occurrence, along with another issue that I'll get into. RWBY eventually finds out about the robotic arm in her pack, and she asks Yang about it. "You have this arm to replace your old one, right? I'm sure you'll be amazing with it," she says. But Yang kinda snaps, and admits that she's scared to use it. Every time she looks at it, she just thinks of that day. Her arm gets hot, pain shoots through it, and it shakes uncontrollably. Flashes and visions of Adam laughing and the sound of his sword cutting the air flow through her mind. And what would happen if she puts it on? Is she strong enough to handle that? She already failed before when she had 2 normal arms. How would this one make it any different? RWBY doesn't tell the others about it, but it won't stop her from being concerned for her sister. She sees how scared and paranoid and even aggressive Yang has become, and realizes she can't keep fighting with one arm. At least not with her style. You see, it isn't just the panic attacks. Yang has been acting differently since she returned to the group. She's been fighting with Blake and Weiss, and even RWBY sometimes. I'll go more into detail about this shortly. Whatever is going on in Yang's head, they can only imagine how tough it is. This leads into Volume 5's finale. It's a difficult fight, almost even, but suddenly Yang gets visions of Adam taunting and laughing at her. It's spurred by the sound of her own mother's sword, the metallic hum of it, eerily similar to that man's blade. She freezes up, panicking and hyperventilating. The laughing grows and grows. In her head, she can't stop him from killing her friends. His voice taunts her, telling how weak and pathetic she is. She can't do it. She's not strong enough. She's having a full-on panic attack. Cinder sees this and wishes to capitalize, but RWBY knocks her sister out of the way. But now RWBY's in danger as Cinder is ready to strike her with that spear of flames. Yang hears RWBY's cry for help, partially snapping her into a lucid state. And even though she just dealt with a panic attack, Yang sees it and is the closest. She's the only one who can save her sister. All of the doubts and harmful thoughts, self-deprecation and panic, she stuffs it away as she knows what she needs to do. It doesn't matter if she's strong enough. She needs to. Yang finally dons the arm in the heat of the moment, but the camera doesn't show it. Instead, Cinder remains in focus, preparing to kill RWBY. It gets closer and closer, suspense building until suddenly, BAM! Punched in the face with Yang's robotic arm. It's played up as a big, triumphant moment. The beat of the music hits right as the punch connects, and it's all in slow motion until it suddenly speeds up as Cinder is sent flying across the room. But with one subtle look, it shows that Yang still isn't ready. Even though she uses it, she still needs to get used to it. Even so, with both arms now, Yang helps turn the tide of the battle in their favor, which forces Cinder into the lower levels and Raven follows. Even though this was a success, part of Yang might not accept that she needs it. But she does, and eventually, partway into Volume 6, she'd better adjust to it, practicing with the arm at both training exercises and everyday life. It would be a steady process, but fighting Grimm and other enemies, as well as solo training, and just using the arm in general, will help work the prosthetic in. The third problem, Yang isn't funny, at least not as often. Yes, one of the symptoms of PTSD is a loss of interest in hobbies, as well as irritability, among many others. And yes, Yang is involved in a war. She's had a lot of horrific events happen to her at a rather young age, and she's been involved in a lot of combat and a lot of hardship. By all accounts, it at least makes sense realistically why she would largely lose her sense of humor. But this isn't reality. This is a story. You can have a realistic portrayal of actual events, trauma, or hardship without sacrificing the characters and story for it. Plus, the main character has a scythe that's also a sniper rifle. There's clearly still a playful element in this series. So I raise this change. Let's keep Yang's sense of humor and love of puns, but this time it's developing her character. You see, it's Yang's way of coping. When we're met with anything traumatic, we develop a method of coping. Some are healthy, others aren't. We need a way to not think about the awful reality and continue living. So rather than her puns and humor being a joyful occasion, they're more of a reminder. They let Yang remember the past when things were simpler and fun, when her smile was genuine rather than forced, when if asked if she was alright, her answer of "I'm fine" was said in earnest instead of as a lie. Her expressions during puns would be subtle, but show that it clearly isn't the same. Maybe she's forcing it too hard. Maybe she realizes that it's not helping, or maybe she gets lost in thought about the simpler days when the world wasn't going to hell. But of course, it would still be funny. It's possible to still keep Yang humorous without being forced and without compromising her character or the tone. In fact, it does more for her character. Because, well, the fourth problem, Yang is a horrible person. Not for the whole series, but somewhere in Volume 5, she starts becoming a really unfun character to watch. Some of the symptoms of PTSD include hostility, irritability, and trust issues. And these are things that Yang clearly has at this point. But it's not faithful to her condition because PTSD isn't the reason why she's like this. If that was the case, she would have acted this way in Volume 4 and the beginning of 5. She would have been difficult to talk to, aggravated, aggressive, pushy, and emotional throughout the whole time instead of just suddenly. PTSD doesn't just show up when it's inconvenient. Her being a very hostile person is more a sign of her character changing suddenly rather than through a natural progression of a mental ailment. She's much less caring and considerate of her sister, she's not willing to accept fault for her actions, she's aggressive and mean for no reason. This isn't because of mental trauma, but because she's being written to be a jerk. I'm not saying that all of this should be thrown out. Yang should still be prone to hostility due to her trauma. As I said earlier, she would get into fights with the group, most often with Blake. No, this is not a retaliation towards Bumblebee, since people know my thoughts about that pairing. And yes, I will do a video on that too. Since Yang was maimed by a White Fang member, one who Blake knew and even worked with, it would generate a lot of mistrust from Yang, made even stronger through PTSD. She should even say some pretty hurtful things to her, like "I never should have trusted you." But they come from a place of anguish, because Yang has had so much time just to her painful thoughts, and it's manifested into this. This aggression would make Yang rather difficult for the whole team to work with. With Weiss, she'd be a little more willing but still cautious and a little aggressive. But I think that she would be most vulnerable with RWBY. After all, RWBY is the one she's known the longest. She's family. RWBY is the only one Yang feels that she can really talk to in the whole group. She's not holding anything back, hiding anything, or out to get her. RWBY is Yang's sister. She'll console with her a lot more. They'll talk about their problems and they'll be sisters. What a shocking thought. Through RWBY, Yang can really learn to heal as she gets to properly vent about her feelings and frustrations in a healthy environment, and RWBY gets experience as a leader by helping her sister. In time, because of this relationship, Yang would eventually console with both Blake and Weiss, apologizing for her actions. Much more importantly with Blake, she would confess that she was wrong. Yang wrongfully projected her disdain for the White Fang onto Blake, and that isn't fair because they're both victims. Blake accepts the apology, and they embrace. And Yang would continue to heal throughout the story, facing her trauma head-on with the help of her team. Yang's story had so much potential throughout RWBY, but it feels like it was abandoned and half-heartedly picked up every so often. In fact, I'd argue Yang doesn't have much of a character arc past Volume 5. Just like a lot of RWBY, there were so many good ideas with Yang that just weren't executed well, or even at all. Pieces of her story work, and so many scenes are great in a vacuum, but when you have context, it all starts to fall apart. It feels like an insult to what the character used to be, to Monty, and to victims of PTSD. Like I said at the beginning, it's a double-edged sword. If done well, you can have a character that sticks with you and has genuine meaning. When done poorly, you have an insulting and sometimes insufferable caricature that takes away more than they give. And unfortunately, that's what Yang became. Because she was my favorite character in the beginning, That's why her regression hit so hard for me. And that's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to show how I think Yang's character arc could have been a lot better, utilizing her trauma and PTSD for a pretty great story that not only adds to her character, but to the others as well. And that is how I'd write Yang. If you have any ideas of how you would change Yang's character, please let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you think of my changes. Also comment any ideas that you would think might show up next for how I'd write RWBY, and as always, make sure to check out my other videos. I talk about anime a lot on the channel, and pretty soon I'll be discussing a lot of other media as well. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time.